Pokemon Platinum is easily the most revolutionary Pokemon game that has ever been released. I'll be explaining why in this video. Quick disclaimer, if I am talking about Generation 4, I'll only be talking about Pokemon Platinum, since Pokemon Platinum is widely agreed upon to be the best Generation 4 game. Hey everybody, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Only 20% of my viewers are actually subscribed, so if you find this video to be enjoyable, make sure to subscribe. Thank you! Now, if I think of Generation 4, I think of the new evolutions. Generation 4 is the only generation that did not only add a bunch of super unique Pokemon, but also added a bunch of evolutions, as well as pre-evolutions to already existing Pokemon. To me, that just adds such a level of depth and story to Platinum. It's like these Pokemon were always there, but you only now get to know about them. And these Pokemon are great. Every single new Pokemon that was released via the evolution got a significant stat boost, and plays out to whatever strengths the Pokemon already had. If a Pokemon already had some kind of niche, you can expect Gen 4 to let that niche blossom, as well as give it loads of new tools, like a shiny array of new abilities, moves, and types. What makes the evolutions still balanced is that they have all been made to have one significant weakness. This could either be in that a Pokemon is an all-out attacker with paper-thin defenses, or that they have some kind of 4 times weakness. This means that at all times in a battle, the Pokemon is a threat, but somewhat threatened at the same time. Just for the sake of the flow with the other games, they obviously couldn't make it so a Pokemon would be evolving if an already known stone was used on it, or when it hit a certain level, as that would screw with the continuity of the other games. This is why a bunch of new items were introduced that are necessary to evolve these Pokemon. This is a creative and smooth way to access all of those new Pokemon, as whenever you would get that item, you would have access to that new great Pokemon at your leisure. Almost all of these Pokemon look great, strong, and simply amazing as well. They have a sense of dominance about them that just makes them look like a threat. And frankly, their performance in battle almost always makes true on that intimidation factor. Then, getting to a feature that transitions greatly from the versatility that the new Pokemon give, as well as what I consider to be the most important feature that was ever added in Pokemon: the physical special split. This feature is what made an insane amount of Pokemon that were absolutely useless to barely usable to be a significant option on any team. Prior to Generation 4, all moves were either physical or special based on their type. Fire type moves, for example, always being special, and then rock type moves always being physical. As of Generation 4, this was changed to where the use of the physical or special attack stat of a Pokemon was based on the description of the move, regardless of the typing. This honestly makes the way that types work in Generation 3 and prior feel absolutely ancient. Let's say you want to use a Sharpedo in Pokemon Emerald. You look at that base 120 attack stat and think, sweet, time to destroy everything and everyone. Well, good luck. Considering both the water typing and the dark typing are special in that game, there is not a single move with the same type attack bonus that Sharpedo is able to use that 120 attack stat with. It barely even makes sense. If you use a Sharpedo in Pokemon Platinum though, where the split is in function, put the dark and water type moves Crunch and Waterfall respectively on there, and make use of that enormous physical attack stat to destroy everything in your path. It just makes so much sense, and it's honestly baffling that this feature was only introduced now. Pretty much every Pokemon with any type of attacking stat can now benefit from those new moves that use that offense. And there are literally no drawbacks to this feature being added. Then, the region. I believe Sinnoh to be the best region there is. I understand that it is a bit messy and it is very easy to get lost or to not exactly know where to go at times. but to me that just adds to the mysteriousness of the region and works together greatly with the story as well. The biggest reason I love the region though is the cohesion of all the places. Sinnoh is not a linear region where you just go from town to town, from route to route, do your story, get your badges and move along your merry way. I am not saying there's anything wrong with that, and it works greatly for most of the games before and after Sinnoh, but the way you move through the region to progress is very unique to Generation 4. Take Jubilife City for example. It's the first major town in the game and you have to come back there 3 times, even though there's not even a gym in there. Once before the first gym, once after the first gym, and then to progress to the 6th gym. Or take the legendary trio in the late game, where you have to go back to the lakes, from Snow Point City to the very spot where you received your starter, to then having to go back to Veilstone, where only the 3rd gym was, mind you, to gather some of the final plot points for the story. This all ties up to the main center in all of Sinnoh, Mount Coronet, the cave system that ties up the entire region. I can barely count how many times it is necessary to move along in this cave to progress in the game, let alone how many times you use it to simply travel from one place on the map to another. It is the hub for so many story elements, leading all the way up to the climax at Spear Pillar, where crossing Mount Coronet is once again a necessity. Although having to cross places multiple times is not exclusive to Generation 4, I do feel like Sinnoh does by far the best job of it. No other generation feels quite as interconnected as Sinnoh does, both through the combination of the map and the story elements. Another thing that Sinnoh has become infamous for is the great difficulty with which you have to progress at some points. What I'm talking about here is not specifically the puzzles that the game throws at you, although they can be very challenging and very rewarding. It is the extended parts of fog, the slow and tough parts of the high grass, and the snow part of the Snow Point City, as well as the abominably high amount of HMs that are required to get to certain points. At points, these elements are without a doubt simply tedious and annoying, but contrary to popular opinion, I do not view these points as a sole negative to the region. When I get done with a tough part in a game, I feel a sense of relief. Now, I get that you shouldn't just constantly be longing for a sense of relief while playing a game, but in the Pokemon series, you barely even have these tough parts. And if they are there, they are almost always pretty mild, or not even that intentionally tough, just the aftermath of some slow or bad mechanics. In Pokemon Platinum, you are genuinely bothered inside while going through fog, and you are genuinely praying to get to some loose patches of snow on the route to Snow Point City to just move a bit faster. Every trainer feels like another nightmare which you are desperate to avoid, and they all take ages because of sad weather conditions. But when you get to the end of it, you are met with a soothing town with calming music where you get to relax, and a big progression in the story is waiting for you. To me, this has just always driven me to continue on the journey. The reward and the discharge you feel when done, as well as the genuine feeling of entering a different segment of the map. To me, that hard, gruesome part of the experience has always felt very rewarding. It is a beautiful and mysterious picture that rewards you for being explorative. And although it does feel messy and confusing at times, I just feel like that adds to the charm and makes it complete. It is, for me, the best designed region that Pokemon has ever made, and I will always be glad to re-explore it. Now, as for the story, to me, the lion's share of the story is not particularly unique or interesting. The evil team is pretty average, and the first couple of quests are just super storybook and pretty much the exact same as every other Pokemon game until that point. It's really in the latter part of the story that it starts getting very interesting. Intriguingly, to me, the strength of the Pokemon Platinum story really happens in the characters. The climax of Pokemon Platinum happens at the Spear Pillar, where you enter the Distortion world to go after Cyrus, who who is chasing Giratina to go after a better world, according to him. I was very impressed with the story and plot in the end, and really liked the way the story turned. But I am especially intrigued with Cyrus. There has never been a villain that looked quite as serious and maniacal as he has. There is a really dark vibe around him that, in my opinion, spelled out something more serious than just a simple Pokemon villain. The way he completely embraces the semi-nihilistic approach of thinking that the world he is in is not the world he wants to be in, that there is something greater he wants to achieve, and his will to get that greater thing no matter what. The way he chases Giratina, therefore driving himself to near insanity, and eventually staying locked up in the grim world he had believed to have the solutions to his problems. This ends up embracing what Team Galactic is all about, even though there were no signs of such schemes until you meet Cyrus and his ideas at the beginning of the endgame. This is not the only character embracing those themes as well. Take Volkner, the final gym leader. The way he also doesn't really see a purpose in his life anymore when you first speak to him, embracing themes of depression and nihilism. These kinds of real-life things coming back in such a polished, groundbreaking game with such good battle features. It just manages to touch something that I really want from a Pokemon game. Two other characters who made a big impact in the game and managed to make a lot of difference in later games as well are both Luker and Cynthia. Both take the form of side characters, yet in a way they always pop up again to make a significant impact on the plot and thus on your progress. Luker is a detective who starts off really goofy. He stays sort of silly for the rest of the game, but you encounter him in times of need. May you need information on where to progress considering Team Galactic or giving out HMs, and in some way, shape or form he does stay an important figure until the very end of the game. Cynthia sort of fulfills the same need, except she has more of a cool, badass approach every time you encounter her. She helps you with information on where to progress as well, and gives you things like the secret potion, which is needed to move on. Then, at the end of the Elite Four, when you discover she's the champion, it just makes her character all the while more epic. This is what I like about a lot of these characters in general. You see and meet them while in so many different places of the region, no matter if the character is good or evil. It makes them seem like actual people with personalities and lives, even though they are part of a video game. They are not just glued to the spot where you eventually have to battle them, and that is something that wasn't really done before Generation 4. Then, talking about the Elite Four, let's see what difficulty Pokemon Platinum has to offer. I should disclaim here that I do not consider Pokemon Platinum to be a particularly hard or challenging game. I would say it's about average on the difficulty scale, maybe a tight knot above it in the later parts. What I do consider a big plus though is that the features that Generation 4 has brought to the table always manages to make battles a lot more complex. As previously mentioned, if there was a water type with a high physical attack stat in any previous game, that would barely be a bother. In this game though, you cannot throw that stat to the wind and simply blast away without concern. Pokemon got a lot more complex in Generation 4, and they were all much needed changes to keep the game progressive. Where Platinum does really excel though is its competitive features. Generation 4 was the first region where VGC Double Battle competitive Pokemon got taken seriously, and this was for a large part because of the amount of new items and moves that were introduced. For items, think of the ones like the choice items that heavily boost your damage output and your momentum, or the Toxic and Fire Orb, which can be used very tactically in combination with moves like Guts or Poison Heal. And then the moves. Think of the insane amount of coverage that has been added in the form of the Fang moves, or just the insane amount of new moves in general that make use of that spicy new physical or special attack stat. It truly makes Generation 4 the first generation where it makes sense to do competitive double battles, and it gracefully took advantage of it. In the main story, however, the amount of things that were done with these new features is lacking. Maybe it is because children are still supposed to play the game, which is fair. But it does really feel like there is a lot of untapped potential in the main game, which is a shame. You only really get to experience the full battle potential of Pokemon Platinum in the post-game, after you beat the Elite Four for the first time and you get to places like the Battle Frontier and Stark Mountain. Although I do find this a bummer, I have to admit that this is how Pokemon has always done it and has been consistent with it throughout all of the games, so I cannot say I am much surprised with it. Now, as for some final points about Pokemon Platinum. As may have been showcased throughout this video, I feel quite a special connection to this game. What I have always loved is just how serious it takes you. The puzzles, caves, mountains, and routes in general don't just feel like a stroll with a bunch of trainers every time, but have some genuine complexity and depth about them, which will almost always reward you for being exploratory. You get access to so many strong Pokemon early in the game, from Generation 4 but also other regions, feeling like the game just screams at you. Hey, please try us out. We are good now. We can be valuable. And that is something which I feel like every player can just appreciate immensely. I feel like I have said everything I wanted to say about Generation 4. It is a game I love dearly, and it is something I will always be intrigued to play again. I hope everyone enjoyed the video. Let me know how you feel about Pokemon Platinum, and let me know how you agree or disagree with my points. Thanks everyone for watching, and have a great day.